Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mary Irwin Theater here at the Rotary Center for the Arts. Tonight we celebrate that historical thing called the debate. Mind against mind, words matching words, and truly what is the ultimate theater as individuals engage in intellectual combat with a learned opponent, using only words as their weapon. And so it truly is a pleasure to welcome you here tonight to the 4th annual Roger Watts Advocacy Debate. We've gathered here 3 years previous, and this is the 4th time, and it's nice to see that over time our crowds are growing. Some of you among your number have been here all 4 times, and for some of you this is the first time ever. But whichever the case, thank you for being here. We appreciate your time tonight. Earlier, walking around, it was a pleasure to run into some individuals who had been here before, and we stopped and talked for a second. And they were truly excited to be here to hear what is going to be said. Life at a university is very much about leading-edge thought, fresh thinking, outside the box, to use that hackneyed phrase. But it's true, and trust me, my gray hair realizes that more than ever. When you bring bright young minds together, when you let them speak to each other, when you let them be challenged by the courses that they take, the papers that they write, the professors who speak to them, it all does come together, and the end result is it carries a nation forward. Many universities send a competitive group into the world to do battle, to take victories. Mostly, generally, a small reserved group, the debating team. A group that carries with it intellectual capability, academic prowess, are effectively a phenomenal intellectual storehouse, a collective of brain. Start to wrap your brain around that. The young people that are gathered here are a collective of wisdom. The debating team, and as they match their wits against other schools, those are the people who are here tonight. I don't know about you, but I'm watching the news a lot these days. I'm sure that many of us are. Tonight I can't help but anticipate the verbal skill set that you're going to see presented to you tonight. I am compelled to offer in contrast the verbal skills that are being presented south of us in the United States on an almost daily basis by the man labeled as the most powerful individual in the world. As we watch and listen to the President of the United States, we are suddenly very much aware of what an incredible skill it is, what a powerful thing it is to be verbal, to be articulate, to have a command of the English language. And very, 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 very many times I will tell you that. With all of that, how blessed we are that young people such as the 4 whom you're about to meet tonight are among the thousands who flock to our colleges, our universities, drawn to fields where communication, drawn to fields where verbal skill set is critical and important. Tonight, I'm privileged to be here at the podium to make you welcome. I have no idea where these young debaters are going to take you tonight, but I trust you that as lovers of language, you can sit back and enjoy the journey. And so tonight, open your minds to the subject of tonight's debate. Be it resolved that personalities have replaced issues in politics. And now, without further ado, would you please stand? Because as in one of the time-honored tributes, honored traditions of the debate, our judges, our teams, our Prime Minister and his government will be brought into the House to the skirl of the pipes. Please stand, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please make them welcome? Chad Goodman, thank you for the pipes. Appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are here to honor the life of one of the best, Roger Watts, who for the better part of 25 years practiced law at Saloom Watts here in Kelowna. He was very much so. I've never met him, but I keep hearing, and please be seated now. Thank you. Down, up, down, up. Anyway, thank you. Appreciate your respect for the individuals who entered the room. We honor Roger Watts, who spent most of his 25 years matching wits and matching words, building cases in a courtroom where he was, without doubt, a feared opponent, and indeed many lawyers who found themselves opposing Roger Watts had a little butterfly in their stomach as they knew who they were going to be up against. Unfortunately, as often happens, life intercedes, and Roger Watts died of a pulmonary embolism back in 2011. But that is how and why we find ourselves here tonight on the 4th annual Roger Watts Advocacy Debates. We honor the life that was. We introduce the debate subject, be it resolved that personalities have replaced issues in politics. And so as you enjoy the debate, for you have the easy job just sitting back and listening to these four do battle. But we have a group of 5 individuals who will look at this somewhat differently, who will listen to it with a different set of ears. They are our judges, who will determine who delivered a point, who devastated the other team, or even more critically, who stages a miraculous comeback with a powerful counterpoint that offsets the argument. They will judge the weight of the debate, and I'm honored to introduce them to you now. First, our head judge, Jane Cartwright. She was called to the bar in '82, practicing law with Pusher Mitchell. Her talents called her to the bench in 1995. A law degree, a degree in psychology, her practice today devoted to family law, a governor of the Law Foundation of BC, president of the Bar Association, sits in Kelowna courts where she hears criminal, family, and civil cases. Jane Cartwright, please make her welcome. Mayor Colin Basran graduated from Okanagan College in the year 2000, a well-known broadcaster journalist at CHBC, founding member of the Okanagan Young Professionals, a member of the United Way Gen Next, the Okanagan Changemakers, spends all kinds of time on numerous boards and committees. Elected to council in 2011 before being elected mayor of our city in 2014, getting ready now to run again, Mayor Colin Basran. Is that fake news? By that lying, cheating media? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the... I'd heard rumors. People are saying. Josh Byron graduated from UBC's Okanagan campus with a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations. If you're familiar with the concept of TED and the TED Talks, he was a founding member of TEDx in Kelowna. A member of the Global Citizen Kelowna Organizing Committee, a board chair of Hope of the United Nations, which is an NGO serving children at risk in more than 22 countries. By day, the general manager of Savvy, a Kelowna-based digital marketing agency, Josh Byron. Don Luthwaite is a senior litigation partner at FH&P Lawyers here in Kelowna. His practice largely in the area of commercial litigation with a focus on insurance law, municipal law, and construction disputes. Lots of work there these days. He's a longtime resident of Kelowna, and what's interesting, and I salute him for it, he has been a judge at every one of these 4 debates since their inception. Don Luthwaite. Donald, thank you. And finally, Sharon Simpson, writer, historian, broadcaster, an affection for words. She's written about Kelowna's General Hospital, the packing industry, the lumber industry. If you haven't seen her definitive work, it is the Kelowna Story in Okanagan History. Spent time on Kelowna's council. She had a unique perspective for the city we call home. A Bachelor of Arts social work degree from UBC. Please welcome Sharon Simpson. Ladies and gentlemen, Jane Cartwright, Colin Basran, Don Luthwaite, Josh Byron, and Sharon Simpson. I have one more person to introduce, and then I'm out of your way. Jacqueline Salter is the moderator tonight. It is her task to control the questions asked, to ensure the debate remains focused, unbiased. It doesn't make sense to me. It's bias that's going to win the argument, is it not? It's her responsibility, however, to ensure that each side of the issue gets equal time. Time to share viewpoints, time to rebut or refute the opposition. By definition, she presides and, to a degree, participates. She is your host and your moderator, Jacqueline Salter. Jacqueline?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to take a moment to introduce all of our debaters. So we have the Prime Minister, Tyrell Lamoureux. And we have our Deputy Prime Minister, Lawrence Watt. We have our Leader of the Opposition, Michael Flood. And we have our Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Nicole Tomasek. So the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition will have 5 minutes to open their statements. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition and the Deputy Prime Minister will have 8 minutes for rebuttal and for their own statements. We'll go into an 8-minute live round where they'll be able to ask and answer rapid-fire questions. And then finally, the Leader of the Opposition and the Prime Minister will each conclude with 3 minutes. I'd also like to introduce our timekeeper, Sarah Nunes, who won Roger Watts last year, one of the members who won Roger Watts last year. And with no further ado, I will take my seat and we will begin the debate. Prime Minister, you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Judges, ladies and gentlemen, the motion before us this evening is, as you already know, that personalities have replaced issues in politics. Now, in the short 5 minutes that I'm up here, I will accomplish 3 things. I will first provide some reassurance to the audience, then I will define the motion, and finally, I'll provide you a summary of our main points so that we all have a baseline of understanding. After all, you can't be Prime Minister without first being a drama teacher. Our main points address each of the significant players of politics, the politicians, the voters, and the media, and how they're influenced more by personalities than the issues. So, while the previous Roger Watts debates have been about pressing issues, like government surveillance and Canada's role in the refugee crisis, this debate is just as important. We have come to a point in society where we need to have this debate, not because we want to, but because we need to. Issues should be more important in politics, but the simple fact is they're not. Now, we define personalities as a set of characteristics or qualities attributed to a person, be it how they speak, what makes them popular, or how the public perceives them to conduct business, be it good or bad. Now, issues is a pretty self-explanatory term, and we define issues as any specific problem facing the voting populace. Now, politics, as defined by Webster's, is the competition of competing interest groups or individuals for power and leadership. Now, as it is different from the act of governing, for this debate, it is the power struggles of political parties or candidates in the pursuit of governing, specifically in the form of campaigning or political debates at a national level. Now, Webster's defines the word replace, again, as taking place of, especially a substitute or successor. And again, what that means for politics in this debate is that personalities have succeeded issues. Issues are still important in the realm of politics. However, personalities have very recently become dominant in the political sphere. For instance, when the Liberals replaced the Conservatives as government, the Conservative Party didn't disappear. They were still important. They still had influence, just not as much influence as before. So to begin, the media. The media is an immensely important aspect of politics. Most Canadians, Americans, Europeans, and Latin Americans get their political news from either the internet or the television. As well, media attention is the single most important factor for a politician to rise in political polls. Now, this would be acceptable, except the media is less focused on the boring stuff, like the intricacies of a bill, but rather the exciting stuff, like personalities, because excitement gets views, and views makes money. The views are found in witty sound bites and platitudes. It's found in controversies between politicians that has been overblown by the media. This is not to say that issues are not addressed. They're simply addressed less frequently during elections. Our second point, politicians. Political candidates have realized this shift in the media, and they've capitalized on it. And this is a dangerous age where the candidate is more known for the type of person they are than the policies that they represent. In a world where there is infinite number of issues that could arise to a government, campaigning and debating is all about proving that I'm the person for the job, that you can trust me to enact electoral reform even when you don't know how to actually do it. Lastly, the voters. Now, my final point is very simple and very brief. The shift in both the media and politicians has given rise to a disenfranchised youth, a middle class that feels this style of politics doesn't address their needs, and has given rise to, again, a wave of anti-establishment movements. And it's you, the voters. You, the everyday people that lose, and that is a problem. So, all of the important characters are influenced by personalities more than issues. The media focuses too much on personalities because that's what makes them money. The political spheres recognize this, and candidates focus on how to come across to the people, not what they bring across to the people. And finally, the voters. They suffer for the failures of others, and they are making a change. My partner will later elaborate on personality-based politics, specifically in regards to the media, political parties, and the importance of trustworthiness. But it is clear that personalities have replaced issues in politics, and people are fed up. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Leader of the Opposition, you may begin.
Thank you, Ms. Speaker. Good evening, everyone, and good evening, judges. First and foremost, I would like to put forward our firm stance that the motion stating that personality has somehow replaced issues in politics is inherently false. For without issues, personalities are powerless in politics. And I'd like to start by rebutting some of side government's arguments because they don't do anything to address this issue with the motion. So I'll go ahead and rebut a couple of their own before moving on with some arguments of our own. Firstly, you mentioned the media as though this is the only source of political information, as though because it's bombarded with sound bites about politics, that we immediately consume that as sort of naive consumers as we are voters. This is just not the case. You're painting voters with a broad brush and considering and making it sound like all we do is watch media, head to the polls, and based on these sound bites, make our votes. Secondly, politicians. I think it's fair to say that people didn't vote for a narcissistic demagogue in the United States because they appeal to narcissistic demagogues or they like that type of personality trait. Politicians have character traits. They use these as mouthpieces. And both of the things that you guys have brought up here, we will actually address in your arguments, but I wanted to lay that out to start. Now to move on to my arguments. One, politics is actually more about issues now than it has ever been. And two, that personalities are but mouthpieces to voice issues and convey to voters a strong stance on the issues of the day. Now, when my colleague and I were mulling over our firm belief that issues dominate over personalities in politics, we recognized immediately the inherent falsehood in this motion, and the fact that the needle has actually swung from personalities to issues. And the evidence for this is illustrated by the information age. With technology, we have more access to information and issues than we ever have. And we're now able to read up on them every single day, and we do. In fact, in many Western democracies, issue consultation has been recorded, and they've seen its astonishing success. In the Netherlands, 40% of the electorate use a voting advice service that aligns their viewpoints with the issues that the party represents most. 13 million people in Germany used a similar platform. Switzerland and Finland are about two other democracies where 30 to more than 40% of the electorate have used a voting issue consultation platform. Issues are indeed more integral to politics than they have ever been. Now, when chatting with my father about this debate a little bit, I asked him, when he was my age, how he read up about issues when he wanted to go and vote. And he mentioned that growing up in rural New Brunswick, he had two options. He either walked 10 kilometers to the town hall, where all he'd really find was a bunch of bickering personalities, or he wrote a letter to his political representative, who might get back to him, which, with using then what was really summed up as snail mail, and surprised, he'd have a decent understanding of one issue, just in time to have missed the election date altogether. Secondly, I see side government's inclination to joke about and focus on the personalities that have taken center stage in the political arena, but to suggest that these personalities are more important than the issues and frustrations that they encapsulate is groundless. People don't get behind people like Trump or Trudeau because of the mouthpiece or the showpiece that they are. No, people get behind someone like Trump because of the mouthpiece that he's the mouthpiece in which he voices issues. 80% of evangelical Christians in the United States, which represents more than 25% of the Republican electorate, voted for a man they'd sooner see in hell, a man who might have been to church but a few days in his life, and I can probably speculate to attend his multiple marriages. No, they voted for him because they knew that he was the only chance at seeing the nomination of a Supreme Court justice who might overturn Roe v. Wade and see abortion criminalized. So they went to the polls, they held their noses, covered their eyes, and they etched an X, voting for a man they may have well despised in favor of an issue they're passionate about. On Canadian soil, issues are center stage as well, and Trudeau was but a showpiece for those issues. Despite claims by someone's Twitter account that climate change is but a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese, we know it's a very real issue. Immigration is of paramount importance, an issue debated on this stage but a year ago. And the marijuana debate has long been overdue to reach a resolve, and Trudeau ran a platform that touched on all of these issues of the day. So be it the boisterous leader to the south or the pretty boy boxer in Ottawa, we know that their personalities are more than just who they are. They're a mouthpiece and they're a conduit for the more important idea being discussed here, the issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. Deputy Prime Minister, you may begin your remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to begin that I actually do have a point of agreement with side opposition. Indeed, people do care about a number of serious, pressing issues. Terrorism, abortion, Kevin O'Leary. But the problem, Madam Speaker, is that we are unable to properly address these issues when we live in a world dominated by personality-based politics. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rebut one of the points made about the media, and then later on in my speech, after I've elaborated on some of our points, I'm going to talk about the Trump and the Hillary US election, and then I'm going to conclude. So first, talking about the media. Yes, side opposition made a good point. The internet and the information revolution has given us many more ways to find out about the news, has given rise to lots of independent media outlets. But, and I encourage you to look this up yourself, don't just take my word for it. In Western Europe, Latin America, and North America, the majority of the populations refer to news through the television. So as long as that is the case, I think it would be unfair to say that the independent media play more of a role at this moment in time. Moving on to the media shift. Once upon a time, journalists focused on the substance of parliamentary bills. They informed people about the intricacies of issues, and they held political figures to account. However, to adapt to the rise of entertainment celebrity culture and social media, mainstream journalists now neglect the substance of issues, and instead they report on controversial one-word slip-ups, political gossip, personality traits, and appearance. Consider how after the US vice presidential debate, all the media focused on was how Tim Kaine appeared aggressive, and while Mike Pence came across as smooth and relaxed. Or how during the UK elections in 2015, all the media reported on was how the Labour leader appeared weak and out of touch, and not because of his campaign speeches, but because of the way he decided to eat a hot dog with a knife and fork. Now, this media shift is significant because multiple studies have revealed that media exposure is the most important factor for a candidate's electoral success. Now, before I move on, I know we're all sick and tired of hearing about Donald Trump, so I'm not going to bring him up in this debate. Now on to Donald Trump. The media were drawn to Trump like moths to a flame. In the Republican primaries, Trump got double the amount of airtime than all other candidates. And this happened not because of his proposals to build a wall, crack down on immigration, but because he sold himself the same way the Trump University Instructors Manual teaches professors to teach. You do not sell products, benefits, or solutions, you sell emotions. And this is what all political leaders do today. They don't focus on comprehensive policies to tackle issues. They don't focus on their image. They only focus on their image and witty sound bites to appear likable or controversial, and they'll say and do anything to get elected. The type of politicians we have today, if they were alive 500 years ago, they would say, yeah, the earth is round, but it's a little bit flat. So, in the process of shaping their image, parties spend egregious sums of money on market campaigners, media advisors, script writers, makeup artists, all in an effort to craft their leaders into a marketable brand that people find attractive, trustworthy, and relatable. And as a result, political leaders have evolved from problem solvers into entertainers, incapable of critically debating policies and unable to effectively tackle the issues. Let's consider a little while back. Let's consider the charismatic political elites of Tony Blair and Barack Obama. They were going to usher in a new era of change. They were going to restore jobs. All the world's issues were going to be solved. But nothing changed. If anything, they were successful in doing everything that they campaigned against. But don't worry, nothing to see here. Everything is okay. Obama is still considered to be a great and successful president. And that's because the one thing the Obama administration did very well and was very successful at is that they were successful in managing the media. And those are not my words. Those are the words of UBC professor Carl Hodge. But it does get serious, I'm afraid. Unfortunately, this obsession with personalities and the failures of the elite political class to address the issues that matter to middle-income workers, they've made trustworthiness the most significant factor during elections. Side opposition said that when people go to vote, they go and vote because they care about the issues, and they have these electronic platforms where they can go and particularly find out about the issues. But however, in very recent years, in the past 2 years, this is no longer the case. It's no longer about voting for a candidate because, say, you're compassionate or you're passionate about tackling climate change. You are now going to vote because you want to vote for a candidate that you trust will solve climate change. Because trust has been eroded in politics. The elite political class in Europe, in America, they left us behind. And this is why Hillary lost. Hillary lost because she was untrustworthy. For all the awful things that Trump said, and for his bombastic nature and whatnot, Hillary lost because she could not be trusted because people perceived her from failing in the past. And I'm afraid to say it gets worse. Political candidates don't amicably debate policy anymore. They resort to personal attacks, blame games, and emotive platitudes like diversity is strength and the economy and the environment go hand in hand. And campaign advertisements don't promote specific policies anymore. The majority are negative, targeting other candidates with phrases like untrustworthy and he's just not ready. And in the 2015 Canadian election, 7 out of 10 Canadian campaign advertisements were negative, targeting another candidate. And even after winning their elections, Trudeau and Trump continue to this day to go on campaign-style tours, rather than sit in their offices and do their job. Is it any wonder that trust in politics in the OECD countries is down to a historic low of 38%? Is it any wonder why global voter trends have declined 10% over the last decade? People are fed up. The media doesn't inform, they entertain. The parties, they don't shape policy anymore, they shape perception. And the issues we care about fall second to personal political profitability. It's time we recognize personality-based politics, wake up, and support this motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Deputy Leader of the Opposition, you may begin your remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Speaker, and thank you, honored judges and members of the audience, for being here tonight to contemplate this important issue. First, before we rebut a few of the government's points, I'd like to discuss 4 of our own to illustrate the absurdity of the motion that personality could possibly replace issues in politics. I'll list these before going back to a few of the arguments that have been put forward to you tonight. The first, we do not deny that personality has a place in politics. This is clear. We're simply stating that it has not replaced issues in politics. It cannot stand alone without issues in politics. Issues, on the other hand, can and do stand without personality. Secondly, personalities fade, but some issues are core to politics and they are timeless. They've been around, they are around, and they will remain in future, long past the scene of politicians that are here today. And thirdly, municipal politics, which government hasn't even touched on, has no room for personality antics. So before I get into these 3 points, I'd like to rebut a few of the motions put forward by Deputy Prime Minister. First of all, the Trump and Hillary election. The reason that Hillary was seen to have lost was simply because she ran an issue-less campaign. She thought she could rely on promoting her own personality to the detriment of Trump's, saying that he was sexist, misogynist, racist, unfit for the presidency. She did not touch on the issues, and all the disillusioned voters in the US, they jumped on that and felt that if she wasn't going to address their issues, maybe Trump would. It was not because of the issues that were not being addressed in the election. It was because of the lack of them that led to Trump being elected. Second, I'd like to touch on an inherent discrepancy in your argument. First, in your opening speech, you said that voters, especially the youth, were disenfranchised, that they were no longer interested, that they no longer cared. Then you go on to give all these stats of all the voters around the world that still tune in to television to follow politics and the issues that they care about. Has it not occurred to you that they watch TV if that's the only option available to them because they do care about the issues? And the failure to address the middle class, that's just a key issue, and Trump seriously addressed that in the election. So we'll save the rest for the live round as time is at a premium here, so I'm going to go into 3 of our own issues here. So first, we do not deny that personality has a place in politics, but it cannot stand alone without issues. Issues, on the other hand, can and do stand without personality. As much as the government would like to convince you otherwise, debate is integral to politics. Like politicians, we are standing up here in front of you today to convince you that our way of seeing this issue is the correct way. If we were to rely solely on our personalities and our attempts to sway you, if we were to flash a wink or a cheeky grin, if my honored opponent across the way were to simply rely on his suave English accent to to convince you, it would not only be an insult to your intelligence, but it would be ineffective. Personality cannot stand alone without substance. As you've mentioned, TV, there are many domains today that do have personalities that stand without substance, but fortunately, politics is simply not one of them. Personalities stand on the shoulders of issues, and they use them for leverage. They cannot replace them. Without these issues, personalities are powerless in politics. Issues, on the other hand, can and do stand without personality, and the case in point here is Stephen Harper. I would also like to quote my professor, Carl Hodge, who's out in the audience here tonight, in saying that Stephen Harper's cat doesn't even like Stephen Harper. Harper himself is on record as saying that he can't even get his own friends to like him. And I'm not saying this to elicit sympathy for poor Mr. Harper. I'm simply trying to pose the question to the government, how could a personality-less politician like Harper serve a 10-year term in government? And you might say, sure, served, past tense. He's been usurped by Trudeau, by this charismatic personality-based politician. But as my colleague pointed out, he ran on the basis of many issues that were very core to Canadians, such as climate change, immigration, marijuana legalization, not to mention gender equality and women's rights. Furthermore, Trudeau has the same personality that he campaigned on, yet he's dropping the ball on issues like electoral reform, as you kindly pointed out. So I ask, with the same personality that got him in the door, how is his mishandling of a key issue resulting in a drop in his political personality, or popularity rather, if personality is all that's important here? Polls show he's dropped as much as 10% over this, and he's gotten a lot of flack for his approval of pipelines in BC, despite his supposed environmentalism. Some issues, furthermore, stand without personalities. Take same-sex marriage, for example. This issue has been around for a long time, and at long last, we have reached same-sex marriage. If you ask yourself what personality politician led to this issue coming to fruition, there is none. Some issues simply take on a life of their own, unlike political figures. On to our second point. Personalities fade, but some issues are timeless. Personalities, they come, they go, they fade, whereas some issues, they've been around, we're still talking about them, and we will still be talking about them into the future, unlike politicians, that their time is inherently limited. I'll give several examples to illustrate how this is the case. The first, healthcare. This is the issue that just never dies in politics as much as we wish otherwise. It's very contentious. For example, we lament the fact in BC that we have to pay MSP premiums, that we face long lines or long waits for surgeries and specialist appointments, and there's a shortage of family doctors. But these issues are nothing new, and Medicare is over 50 years old. And we are still asking ourselves if this is the best way to deliver something that is so near and dear to Canadian citizens. Or abortion. This one is as dated as the world's oldest profession, and as my colleague pointed out, Roe v. Wade, the US Supreme Court decision on abortion, was laid down in 1973. Canada's Supreme Court decision, R.V. Morgentaler, was laid down in 1988. We've come a long way in regards to women's rights since the 1970s and 80s, thankfully, but this issue is still far from settled. On our very own UBCO campus this past late January, we were subject to graphic anti-abortion demonstrations and opposing pro-choice rallies. Clearly, this issue is not going anywhere, unlike the politicians of the day. Thirdly, refugees and immigration. Trump and his supposed wall are not representing a new phenomenon. Perhaps you'll recall the infamous Komagatu Maru incident in which off of Vancouver Port, over 350 Punjab refugees were turned away. The Chinese head tax to discourage Chinese immigration, that was laid down in 1885. These big personalities, they channel xenophobic fears. They act as a lightning rod for them, but they do not replace the issue itself. And this issue is set to become even more pertinent in our era of globalization and integration. Take marijuana. The Reefer Madness fear campaign was in the 1930s, and now we're still on the brink of legalization, or so they keep telling us. But the issue won't be settled even then. There's taxation, regulation, distribution, exportation, and districts around the world that will be fighting for legalization if they do not have it. As my colleague mentioned, politicians like Trudeau, they harness these issues, they use them for political support, but they do not replace the issues themselves. Racial equality and discrimination. I'm sure you're aware of the Black Lives Matter campaign. This is nothing new. This issue goes back centuries, as does the struggle for Aboriginal rights. There are many historical examples. I don't feel the need to list them for you here tonight. I could go on, but this point is very clear. The thought of any personality replacing any of these timeless issues is simply laughable. Again, they use the issues. They do not replace the issues. These issues have evolved and they've progressed, but they are timeless and they are core to politics. Lastly, government has a very narrow...
Time.
Thank
Thank you, Deputy Leader of the Opposition. We are going to begin the 8 minutes live open round. Deputy Prime Minister, you may begin the round.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So you talked about long-lasting issues, and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition talked about these long-lasting issues, and you put it very eloquently, and I agree with you on a lot of it. But wouldn't you concede that over the last decade, one of the reasons these issues don't get solved is because political leaders don't go into Parliament being problem solvers, they go in being entertainers. What they're being taught, it's the media advisors, it's the script writers, it's the makeup artists, they craft them into a marketable brand. Can't you acknowledge that at all?
I thoroughly disagree. I believe that citizens like you in the audience here tonight, you have your own strong opinions about all of these issues, and politicians represent the electorate. Because the electorate itself cannot agree on these contentious issues, we can't expect politicians to agree on them either. Politics is about brokering issues, and they are constantly trying to appeal and please as many people as they can. There are no resolves to these issues because people can't agree on these issues.
Well, if issues were really more important, would they not talk in specifics? Would politicians not say, I'm going to do this, and this is how I'm going to do it? Instead of summarizing their platforms into like 4-word sentences or using platitudes like, we're going to make America great again. That's fantastic. How? If politicians really care about issues, would they not talk in specifics on how they're going to solve them?
We still understand that personality has its place in politics, and they have to put in these sound bites, and they have to appeal to voters, and they have to use short sentences to translate issues. But they know that at the end of the day, the voters have very specific interests about very complex issues, and they can't completely complexify those things, and they need to be mouthpieces. They need to have that charisma to translate the issues. We're not saying that they are the best at describing the issues or even the best at solving the issues, but we are saying that if somebody gets behind them, that if somebody goes to the polls, it's because of 1 or 4 or 10 or 15 of the issues that that politician has behind them, has on their platform.
Well, I'm sorry, I have to completely disagree with you. I think one of the reasons Justin Trudeau won in this election was because he was able to mobilize the youth vote. He went to university after university, partaking in selfies and talking and taking off his jacket. Could you see Stephen Harper going into a university, taking off his jacket, rolling up his sleeves, showing off his tattoos, and taking selfies? I don't think so.
I like your ability to also be a showpiece like Justin Trudeau. But
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Personality-based politics.
I'd like to ask the
Proves our
youth
point.
voters.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask the youth voters in the crowd today, if when Justin Trudeau came around, if you're only voting for him on his charisma, or you have an issue that you care about, I think you're really underestimating and painting a very broad brush of the youth vote. It's great that he pushed voting, like Barack Obama does in the US. He says it's the most important thing that we participate in. That doesn't mean you just go and etch an X. People go with preempted decisions about their vote, and those are based on issues, and that's what we're saying.
I think you bringing up that youth vote is a very, very good point, because one of the things that a lot of youth who are here tonight, a lot of you are university students, will agree is that Trudeau ran on a platform of helping student debt. But did you know that the NDP also ran on that? They said they would increase grants, no interest on student loans, and they would guarantee you a paid internship or a co-op outside of university. So what's the difference between Trudeau and Mulcair? What's the difference between the NDP and the Liberals? It's that people trusted that Trudeau would actually do what he said he was going to do. They had trust in him to do what he said he was going to do, and that he could actually do it.
Yeah, he could actually solve the issues.
I would
Yeah,
counter
but they
that
trusted
with
him to do it.
With our first-past-the-post system of government, as much as someone might like to vote for the NDP and believe that they will address these issues, if you don't think a government can get a majority, there's not much point in using a vote on a candidate or a party like that. I'd like to ask, how was Trump's failure to repeal Obamacare, despite his absolutely formidable, huge personality, accounted for, if personality is all that there is to politics?
No, I'm sorry. When it comes to the U.S. election, like I said, he taught the same, he read the Trump University Instructor's Manual. He used his bombastic nature, and he talked about issues. He talked about building a wall. He talked about cracking down on immigration, but he didn't come out with any specific policies whatsoever. People went to the ballot box and they said, do we want 5 more years of the same, or do we want change? And as awful as Donald Trump is, they saw him as anti-establishment, and they trusted him more than they trusted Hillary Clinton.
Anti-establishment, particularly because people felt disillusioned that their issues that were important to them were not being addressed by status quo politicians.
Status quo politicians are an issue. Change in government is an issue.
Because they can no longer trust
parliamentarians
them.
is an issue. Yes. And Donald Trump was a fresh resolution to that issue.
Yes, because they thought they could trust him. They can't trust the establishment. The other thing with Trump is that by our definitions, we're talking about campaigning and debating. And in his campaign, he promised to repeal Obamacare, and people trusted that he could do it. Regardless of if he could do it or not, people trusted that he could, in fact, do it.
The government seems to think that politics ends on voting day. That after that, there's no such thing as politics anymore. That it's just about getting your foot in the door and then politics stops. But no, politics is about the democratic institutions that have been around for the long time. They're about the democratic institutions that didn't allow him to repeal Obamacare, and they're about the democratic institutions where a Hawaii court judge did not allow him to ban Muslims from coming to his country. How are those things not politics, and how are those things not representing issues?
No, I think you actually make a very good point there. But I think another thing that we can all acknowledge is that before government, election period is so important because that is when we democratically decide who we want to be in government. But I actually have an interesting point. You said, yeah, establishment politicians not following up on their promises, that's an issue. Voter turnout, that's an issue. Those are significant contributing factors to the personality-based world we find ourselves in today. By acknowledging their existence, aren't you in turn acknowledging that personalities do play a much more significant role in politics today?
We've never denied that personality plays a role whatsoever, but to claim that they usurp issues in politics is absolutely absurd. Politics is issues, and again, these politicians, they use the issues, harness the issues, ride the waves of issues to gain popularity and support and mobilize people. They can't mobilize the citizenry and get all these supports and these votes and these protests and these people putting banners in their front yards strictly based on their politician personality. It's because these people represent issues that are important to them.
I think your point about governing is, I think it's a valid thing to talk about. But if you did not know, a recent study conducted asked members of parliament from the US, Canada, the UK, Scotland, and they asked members of these parliaments, do you in fact read the bills that you are passing? And a majority of them said no. They're not even reading the bills that they're passing. So regardless of what they're doing, if politics was really about the issues, would they not at least warrant a reading?
There seems to be, as far as reading, I cracked open the New York Times this morning, and the virtual...
No, reading of the bills, that they are actually passing in legislation, reading of those bills specifically. Not reading, but reading of those bills.
We're not here to say that the politicians that are in Parliament or elected to Parliament in Canada or be it in the US are the best at solving issues or are taking the most 100% efficient way to approach the issues. But in the eyes of the voters, this is actually funny. It's something you guys brought up in your first argument, that you were going to touch on how the voters are a big part of politics. And then as you went through, you hardly talked about voter consideration and what voters think and why voters go to the polls. You painted it with a broad media brush. But whether the politicians are in there and they're being efficient or not, does not disregard the fact that the voters, the friendly voters here in the crowd today, still have their concerns about issues.
That is the end of the live round. Leader of the Opposition, you may begin your closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Speaker. First, I'd like to come back and make a couple rebuttals of some really big fallacies that were brought up here. One, that politics is all about media. That you guys in the crowd today are media puppets. You turn on your TV, you turn it off, you head to the polls, and whoever had the loudest voice on the stage is the person that you etch an X next to. No consideration, as I stated in the live round, was given to voter consideration. And in a democracy, a political democracy, we know that what voters believe is their strong stance on issues, and that is the most important part of politics. They said that they would consider voters, and they didn't. Now, to summarize how obvious it is that issues have overtaken personality in politics now more than ever, we offered you several points. One, that the needle has actually swung from personalities to issues. Two, that personalities are just effective mouthpieces to voice issues. That the timeless nature of issues means that no personality can ever usurp the integral and core part of politics, namely issues. And that in municipal politics, the antics of personality have virtually no place. Lastly, we talked about this in the live round, that politics supersedes elections, and the rigidity of democratic institutions means that not one personality, not Trump, not Trudeau, can come in and manipulate the issues as they believe. Now, as I approach our final remarks, I really want you to think about what voters consider when they head to the polls. What are they thinking about in those last few moments? We'd like to be a little more generous than to argue that you head to the polls with either animosity or infatuation for a personality. No, we'll be more generous to the voters today, because we know that when you head to the polls, you consider how your vote will affect your finances, how your vote will affect your well-being, and most importantly, how your vote will affect the issues you care most about. You see, in politics, we critique the personalities and the character of political leaders based on how they respond to issues, based on their personality, but we judge and assess the way we will vote, protest, and engage in democracy on the basis of how said leaders respond to issues. Similarly, what the judges will do here tonight is vote on not just our delivery, but on the strength and relevance of the content and substance that we have offered you. My colleague and I are firm in our belief that we have succeeded in solving some of those issues for you, and we are steadfast in the belief that issues are the most important thing in politics. Without issues, personality is powerless in politics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. Prime Minister, you may conclude.
From the beginning of this debate, we have never said that the issues do not matter and that people do not care about the issues. However, what we are saying, and what the opposition has failed to refute during this debate, is the fact that these issues cannot effectively be addressed because of personality-based politics. The media don't inform, they distract. Political parties don't shape policy, they shape perception. And as a result, personalities have replaced issues. Now, some things that they said that Hillary lost because she had a terrible personality, or Harper's cat doesn't even like them. Regardless, like we said at the beginning, very beginning, regardless, good or bad, they lost because they didn't have a personality. We're not saying personalities are good, simply that you need to understand that they are needed. And if they don't have one, then you lose. They also failed to answer our question about reading the bill in the open round. If politics was really about issues, members of legislature would read a bill. Now, we would not be having this debate if it wasn't for people like Donald Trump, Justin Trudeau, and Hillary Clinton. These politicians either won or lost based on their personality. We are having this debate because the political elite class has failed, and voters no longer trust the establishment to represent their interests. This is where the anti-establishment movement comes in. They said they were going to get things done, and people trusted them to do it. People trust them more because the media focuses on personalities and what kind of people the candidates are, and focus on making money. The candidates focus on how they're going to be perceived, petty political point scoring, and giving off the perception that they care about issues, but all they care about is getting elected. Political parties carefully craft a candidate that is likable, relatable, and say the perfect words at the perfect time to get you to vote for them. They are focused on and they force voters to focus on the entertainment factor of politics and not what we all care about, the issues. Ladies and gentlemen, this debate has been full of well-articulated points from both sides. However, the opposition has failed to break down our argument enough for their position to be effective. We have not been shy to acknowledge that issues are important, but personalities take the center stage. We also acknowledge that this is a problem and it needs to change. However, it does not change the fact that personalities have replaced issues in politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. This concludes the 4th Annual Roger Watts Advocacy Debate.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the judges now get down to business. They will retire to their chambers, backstage to begin deliberation. And I think it'll be interesting. It would be interesting to sort of be the fly on the wall and have the opportunity to sit in and listen to how the judges, looking a slightly different set of optics, start weighing their points and point, counterpoint, and so on, and see how it all works out. The judges have 10 minutes. That's not much time. So they have 10 minutes to deliberate backstage and come to a decision. So we're not going to be long.
It was such a great discussion in an area that's really been on everyone's minds, and we were very impressed with everyone's cleverness, your breadth of knowledge. You're all quick on your feet. You have great personalities. They came through, as did all the issues. You know, it really was, we think, the toughest decision that we've made so far. Other years, I think, have been a bit easier. It was a very narrow contest and very close to a tie. In the end, we've decided that the winners are the Leader of the Opposition and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. And that's Michael Flood and Nicole Tomasic.
Without further ado, we'll ask Sandra Watts to come out. We'll ask Wally to come out with her, and the two of them will present the checks, hand out the prizes to what it will be a thunderous round of applause. First of all, presenting first prize. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think anybody, if you've been here all 4 years, if this is your 4th year, I think you would agree with Judge Jane Cartwright that this is the best debate yet. It keeps getting better. The quality of the discourse improves. Congratulations to both teams. And ladies and gentlemen, next year will be the 5th anniversary, and I hope that you would come back and come with us and spend an evening or a short evening with us. Bring some friends with you. And I'd like to thank our judges who all have been so gracious to be here. Truly, thank you very much for your time. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, to the runners-up, don't feel too bad. You had a tremendous argument. And to our winners, congratulations to you. Few handshakes here on the stage, but we invite you to all come to the mezzanine and spend a little time with us. Thank you so much for being here. Have a good evening.